Before I left last month to visit my three sisters down in Florida, I mentioned that I am not a great fan of flying, don't really enjoy it. Normally, I'll go down to Detroit because since it's Delta's second biggest hub after Atlanta, you can fly pretty much anywhere nonstop, and my preference is to go up once and down once, if at all possible. But I had that I'd earned a while back a free round-trip ticket on American Airlines, and if you fly an American, even out of Detroit, you have to connect someplace. So flying out of Flint, you connect in Chicago, and so I used that ticket to fly out to Chicago. The plane that would make the most convenient connections in Orlando left at 6:50 in the morning from Bishop in Flint. I wondered how the pilot could even be awake at 6:50 to fly to Chicago. But when I got there, as I was sitting in the plane waiting for it to go, found out that the plane that goes at that time to Chicago actually comes the evening before and stays overnight. And they were anticipating that evening, January 11th, Wednesday, that there would be ice and snow, and so they fueled up the plane in order that they could spend some time de-icing it. As it turned out, that weather did not, in fact, materialize, so there was no need to de-ice, but the plane was already too full of fuel to take off. So they had to sit for about 20 minutes to burn off fuel so that the plane would be light enough to take off. The pilot also came on and said that it was even more of a need to burn off fuel because the runway at Flint Bishop is shorter than most runways, and so the plane couldn't be too heavy. To hear that it was shorter did not make a great deal of confidence in me to grow either, so I was very happy they burned off the fuel. Finally, we took off. He assured us that we would arrive in plenty of time to make our connections, and we did arrive in Chicago a pretty decent time, but then I had not been in O'Hare Airport for years and years and years, and we just taxied and taxied and taxied and taxied. I wondered where in heaven's name we were going to. Finally, we got to the gate, and then I began to really wonder if I would have enough time to make my connection, because it was, as one would expect, in a different concourse than the one we arrived at. And as I say, that's my first time in Chicago in a long time, but there's several concourses, not like Metro in Detroit where it's just one long concourse. That concourse there, just a little aside, is the second longest concourse in the world. The first one being in Tokyo's airport. But of course, you just have to get on the tram at Metro to get to your gate. If it's too far away, well, you have to run. At O'Hara, which hard for me to run, but I did start going as fast as I could because it was two concourses away, and as I was going fast, finally find the right concourse, turned down it, was going, but looked at the gate numbers, and they did not seem to make really an awful lot of sense. So I figured I gotta stop to take a look at these numbers, figure out where they are at. So as I was going very fast, my feet stopped moving, but the rest of me did not. And I went onto the floor, flat on my face. They do a pretty good job of cleaning the floor there at O'Hare Airport, I realized there. But there were some ladies standing right by at their gate who were very, very solicitous and came and helped me up, and one said, "You need a drink of water," so she gave me a bottle of water to drink. And there was another person there who, I'm not sure if they called them red caps anymore, but had not a wheelchair, but a pushing chair. She got me to sit in that and started wheeling me around to the customer service to reschedule my flight, which was about 2 hours later. They got me another flight. Said that I needed something to eat, not only a bottle of water, but something to eat. So wheeled me over to McDonald's, which is, you don't go up there to order. Personally, it has a computer screen that you push, and I thought, I don't know how to do this. So, but ended up getting fed nonetheless, and So I got down to Florida, and after I got to Florida, I had a very nice 2 weeks, not anything like my experience at O'Hare Airport, to which I do not think I will go again. But we'll leave from Detroit from now on. Somebody at St. Joseph's this morning said, well, Father, don't think bad about Bishop Airport. I said, well, I don't feel bad about Bishop, I feel bad about O'Hare. And so maybe I'll fly out of it again, I don't know. Today's gospel passage, Jesus tells us something that makes a great deal of sense when he tells us that you don't light a lamp and then hide it. Now, of course, you wouldn't light it and hide it because nobody would be able to benefit from it. But there's also another thing we know about if we hid the light. We know from science, if we were to put cover over that light, eventually it would use up the oxygen underneath and then go out. So our Lord is telling us, not only using that analogy of a flame to symbolize faith, that we not only want it to show, but of course we need to be sure it is nurtured, or else it will go out. So we could have a steady flame, like these here at the altar candles, but there are some things that could be done to make even a steady flame burn brighter. I want to make it very, 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 very clear that I'm not encouraging anybody to do any of these things, so parents, keep an eye out on your kids, all right? But, if you had a canister of hydrogen, you could spray hydrogen gas on the candle and poof, it would get much, much brighter. You could take a bottle, if you had a misting bottle that had some fuel in it, gasoline, kerosene, something like that, you sprayed it on the flame, it would get much, much brighter. Magnesium, I think, is the thing that you put on fire, and boy, it just burns so very brightly. Once again, don't do any of those things that I just mentioned. They wouldn't be safe, it'd be dangerous. But I use them as an analogy about how you can do things that would make the flame not just be steady, but burn even brighter. And for we as Christians, when we talk about our faith, the light of our faith, well, those are things such as prayer. Prayer will help the flame of our faith burn brighter. We should always spend time each day in prayer. It does not need to be a long time. Sometimes people want to spend a great deal of time each day in prayer. Well, if you can, that's fine, but most of us don't have that kind of time, and it's not necessary to spend large amounts of time at prayer. We can spend few moments of prayer many times throughout the day. It adds up eventually. We might do devotional prayers that we know by heart or from a book. We might pray the rosary. We do morning prayer, evening prayer. It's not necessarily so important what time of the day the prayer is. Morning prayer and evening prayer are wonderful, but praying any time is what ultimately is the most important thing, regardless of the time of day. If you ask young folk, children, what prayer is, they'll say talking to God. And there is reality no better, definition than that. It is talking to God. And sometimes, I've encountered over the years, people say, well, God doesn't want to listen to what I have to say. Well, that's not true at all. God desires to hear our simplest messages, our simplest prayers. So certainly to make the flame of faith burn brighter, prayer is important. I've mentioned, many, many times over the weeks, over the months, the importance of the scriptures, especially the New Testament, especially, of course, the Gospels, the four Gospels. If we did nothing but read from the four Gospels as Christians, we would be all set. I have made a practice over many years to read a chapter of the Gospels every day, and over several years, you keep going through the Gospels over and over again. You might not be able to say, well, in Matthew chapter 12, verse such and such, Jesus said this, but you will know what Jesus said. You might not be able to quote chapter and verse, but you will have a very good sense of what our Lord has taught and what he has said. If one were to do that, daily or every other day, something like that. So that flame of faith can be made brighter, certainly through the scriptures, through the Gospels. Of course, we know the sacraments. will help the flame of faith burn brighter, especially the Eucharist, where we encounter our Lord Jesus personally, face to face, so to speak, where he enters into our very self to nourish us with his very presence and love. So certainly that kind of thing will keep the flame of faith burning brightly in our lives. You know, going to Mass on Sunday is a good, habit. It is people who find it difficult to go to Mass on Sunday. Usually it's not for any great or profound theological reason. It's just that it's become a habit that they don't go. And so they can reverse that by the opposite habit of going regularly, receiving any of the sacraments, sacrament of penance, encountering Jesus' forgiveness. All those things will help the flame of faith burn brighter in our lives. And then just finally, the power of charity to make the flame of faith burn brighter in our lives. Jesus in the Gospel says, love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. This sums up all the law and the prophets. In Matthew 25, Jesus tells us that the power of charity, the power of goodness and caring for others to guarantee, Matthew 25, our entrance into heaven. So certainly, that life of charity, life of virtue, life of goodness will help the flame of faith in our lives burn bright. So those four things, I'm sure there are others, but prayer, the Gospels, the sacraments, of course, charity and love, ways to make the flame of our faith burn brighter in our lives, so that not only will it not go out, but as our Lord says, that it will burn brightly for others to see, so that God may be given glory by our own actions, by what we do in our lives, being good example to others, drawing other people to the light of Christ through the goodness of our own lives.